All right. Okay, welcome. It's been a while since podcast has happened on my channel. It's been very busy on my end.
Oh,
For those that have followed me on social media, they probably got an idea of how busy I am. But today, besides all of that busyness, we got Mr. David Jauregui, a teacher and educator in the Alhambra Unified School District, a union member with ATA, the Alhambra Teachers Association, and all around kind of a badass of a character.
well,
And so,
that's a nice intro. Appreciate that.
yeah, definitely. And then, I guess full disclosure, like me and Haruki, like we work in the same school, like run the same circle. So this is kind of like us, kind of like both kind of reconnecting and then
Yeah,
connecting at the same time.
yeah,
And so, you know, you we've kind of started the year off with school year, in
mhm,
August and things like that. And there's been a lot of things happening across the news and things like that with school. um how have you been in kind of dealing with that? We're in November, right? The beginning of November, school is starting. And how have you been personally feeling about how schools has been running since August? Also, and I forgot to ask how anything else that the audience should know about you. Sorry. So
Um, I mean, that was pretty succinct. I think maybe if there's other stuff we can, it'll come out naturally, organically.
definitely.
Well, the school years, it's had its ups and downs, and
Hmm.
I always like to start with positive and try to end with positive.
Hmm.
So I'll do that. It's great being back in the classroom, first of all.
Hmm.
Distance learning, it just doesn't compare. Especially, I think myself and a whole lot of my colleagues at the school, and then a whole lot of like-minded educators out in the world, are much more. There's a whole lot of jargons for it. There's project-based, there's historical-based simulations, which is sort of my what I emphasize, and those kind of things just do not translate on through Zoom,
Hmm.
right? So there's a lot of hard realities in the year and a half of distance learning, and it's nice being back in the classroom. It's nice interacting with young people again, on a face to face or half a face,
Yeah.
so to speak. Um, and those first days, it was unique in how quickly like instant connections were being made with students.
Hmm.
I had students hanging back after the bow and asking me stuff on the first day. And usually it's not the first day. Usually, first day it's like it's got a different energy. Kids are moving around.
Hmm.
But I have in my classroom, I have kind of like a nerd wall, sort of like right here in my office behind me. I got some comic book stuff, and that's one of those things I use to like instantly kind of like, oh look, kids, like I got like all these dorky interests, and I'd love to chat about them
Hmm.
and all that stuff. So like I had kids right away connecting. But there's also a lot of realities. I think one of the things that teachers across the board, like pretty much every teacher I've spoken to, is there's some behavioral issues. And the reality is, it's not just kids. You look out in the world, and adults have forgotten how to be kind to each other in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm generalizing, but it's apparent. And that combined with being understaffed has presented some challenges around sort of addressing those behavioral issues,
Hmm.
combined with some of those damn TikTok challenges that you saw at the early start
At
of
the
the
bit,
year.
I know at
Yeah,
the
it
beginning
was.
of the year. Yeah.
It had. There's a few days there that were kind of surreal insofar as like, oh my god, like our restrooms are destroyed. There was fights. Like what's happening? Like what did we come back to? Um, but as a staff, we came together and did several things. Like we showed up at lunch. Like so, in those days, like I had 20, 30 teachers, 20, 25 teachers. Don't want to exaggerate. Out there on in the lunch area, just walking around, interacting with kids, and it really sent that message. Like what, like this is not gonna be tolerated. And so now we're moving forward in that direction, in a more positive direction.
Yeah, I think I remember on one of my random visits to the campuses that like I was like, huh, I think there's a lot more teachers out and about. Usually, like teachers take lunch and things like that.
Yeah,
And so it's just like, oh, what's happening? And then one of the students from the Dream Center was like, oh yeah, Mr. Kim, there's all of this weird stuff that's been happening. And it's just like it's a
yeah,
weird energy. I think it's a weird like funk, right? And
it was.
yeah, and I just calling it like it was. It's like I think students, teachers, parents, staff had to kind of force themselves to go back into like a normal without
Mhm.
really acknowledging it, right? Or acknowledging that like the 18-month elephant in the room that
Yeah,
we've gone
there's a
through something.
trauma.
Yeah.
There's a trauma,
Mhm.
and I think we have not addressed it yet, for lack of, um, at least in an organized way. But then that reaction was, I was able to kind of put that call out through, my role in the union, because I'm what's called the segment director on our site, so I'm the main communicator of union business. So I was like, hey everybody, let's, if you can come out, let's come out to lunch. Let's walk the campus during your conference period. Um, let's be visible between, and during passing periods, between classes, and it's like anything, you have to be able to show that we're addressing it. Otherwise, that kind of behavior is enabled. I had a I had one of my friends who's a psychologist, a school psychologist in the district. His name's Frank Tobias. He put it in a way that, it's like it wasn't anything new to me, but it was so succinct. He said something like that: even these behaviors are people looking for community, right? These young people, um, and that even like, even those kind of defiant behaviors are like they got their little crew that they're trying to to impress or whatever, or to and so it helps to empathize. Um,
It's kind of like an understand like teenager thing. If I want to think back then on how I was a teenager, right? Like trying to see it in the most empathic way, right? Is like imagining myself not having that student like face-to-face interaction and then trying to get back at it on 18 after 18 months. It's like you might end up being like that awkward kid. Is like, okay, this might be the cool thing that gets me under the cool side of like students and
mm,
things like that, and so therefore I'm going to do that, right? And so
yeah.
and it is, I think, for a lot of teenagers, is like it's finding community. It's finding a place where you can both call your own, but also be a membership of.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes those things can manifest negatively.
definitely.
And that's why, your work at the Dream Center becomes so much more important. All the teachers that are trying to advise clubs, that are just trying to give students a positive experience at school, like it becomes so much more important this year than ever. So your work is appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. I also remembered. I think that same student was also telling me, it's like, hey, Mr. Kim, it's like we've got to the point where like the school could like open up the restrooms on the second and third floor,
Uh,
and now all of a sudden it's like with this weird TikTok trend. Also, by the way, the TikTok trend is like the what was call it, the devious lick or something, but it was,
Devious licks, I think.
yeah, and like with that weird trend that was happening, it's like the school was threatening to close restrooms, right?
Mhm.
Policing restrooms, and some
Well,
of
we
the
did. We
yeah,
did.
oh yeah,
And
so
part
so
part
that
of
did
that
happen.
was, well, and part of that was functional. Several of the restrooms were destroyed,
Hmm.
and I've heard, and I've heard it said that, it's gonna it end up costing the district a few $100,000, because this was school wide. I mean, district wide.
Right, right,
Um,
yeah, it's not just that one school that we're in, it's
yeah,
it's all of the high schools
yeah,
that has dealt with this.
and
Yeah,
even some of the middle schools,
yeah.
from what I understand.
That's weird. It was like nation. It took like it got the attention of nationwide news, right? It got. I saw it on like what NBC that did like a piece on it. I'm like, Oh, geez. It's like
Yeah,
you knew, I think for me, I knew that there was like a pent up energy, right? Going back to school and all of these things. But I didn't think it was gonna be like that, right? I didn't think it was gonna be that's the result of that pent up energy.
yeah,
So yeah. I did
100%.
want to ask. So you said you're a bit understaffed, and before I go into the big thing of our conversation about vaccine mandates and issues of that, bu- um, how has your workload felt throughout these past couple months, from the beginning of August up until now? I remember listening to Vox podcast on school burnout, right? Teachers, districts on like I think Midwest and East Coast are deciding to, like, every other Wednesday it's going to be a half day. Teachers can do their professional development every 2 weeks and all of these things. And a lot of teachers have indicated that they are feeling sort of burnt out,
Yeah.
trying to get back at it. Do you feel very similar? Do you think that a lot of your colleagues have been feeling this same way?
Yeah, yes and yes.
Hmm.
I'm trying to be real and not complain too much.
Hmm.
If you know what I mean.
Of course.
But it's harder than ever. Like it feels in a lot of ways like first year teaching for me.
Right.
And first year teaching for any teacher is really difficult. Um, I remember in grad school they told me like there's the teacher 30, like that first year teaching you're gonna put on 30 pounds.
Hmm.
Stress eating, whatever. And my first year teaching, I put on exactly 30 pounds. It's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, the we've basically had to rethink our entire craft
Hmm.
2 years in a row.
Right.
Last year, because of distance learning,
Hmm.
I have in my classroom, I do a lot of activities, a lot of artistic projects, um, a lot of interactive discussion type stuff, whether it's a Socratic seminar or a structured academic controversy, where even moving seats and things like that become part of the activity on some level,
Hmm.
and all that's out the window. And that's some of my best stuff. Historical based simulations sometimes involve uh, students being a character and interacting with other students in that character. Like right now in my class, I'm doing this mock constitutional convention.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't do that last year because it's just the logistics of it on Zoom. Um, we're figuring out on our own, and there wasn't a lot of time for training, and uh, so we did the best we can last year. And now this year, there's still, students are masked. We're being encouraged to still submit work through the online platform. In our case, the Google Classroom.
Hmm.
Because the reality is students are going to come and go. Students are going to get sick. Students are going to have to quarantine because they were exposed, and to facilitate to make it easier on everybody, teacher and student, like we're doing that way. But it also, again, it forces me to adapt in certain ways that in the typical year, like I'm kind of on autopilot for some of like the task based stuff.
Hmm.
Because I feel like if I teach a simulation, like for example, eh, I have this French Revolution simulation that I taught when I was in teaching world history, and it
Right.
was written by my master teacher Bryan Gibbs. Awesome dude. If he ever sees this, you're awesome. Um, and I've given it to everybody. There's teachers on campus. Travis Corona does it, um, and it's just great. It's great material. It's 21 days if you do it start to
Hmm.
finish of reenacting the French Revolution in a lot of ways. So that's the kind of thing that takes maybe 3-4 years to get right. Only
Right.
because like you do it 1 year and that's it. You're not picking it up until next year. In the traditional school calendar that we operate under, some schools do like trimesters and stuff. I don't know, but if I do it in September, I'm not going to do it till next September. And then you tweak, you do little changes, you find what can be more efficient. You do it the third time,
Hmm.
another year later, and then finally by that fourth time coming around, it's like okay, I figured this one out. we didn't have, now
Mm,
I'm back to zero for a lot of these processes, for a lot of these activity type based
because
curriculum things.
and it's like a confluence of a lot of issues, right? It's like the feeling in the air when it comes to the students, probably also, after a year of distant learning, like that quality of learning that students had were probably didn't help them all that much.
No,
And I
I
think,
would agree with that.
yeah, I
Or
think
or at
some.
least or at least it presented difficulties that some of our less academically motivated kids really struggled with.
Right.
There were some kids that did just fine,
Hmm.
but I think one of my strengths as an educator is I've been able to get something out of those kids that might not otherwise be motivated to provide much.
Yeah, yeah.
And now even that motivation is lacking in 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 some of the kids because it's like, again, going back to the this is a massive trauma that we've suffered as a society.
Hmm.
uh there's going to be, mathematically speaking, there's going to be kids that have lost somebody,
Hmm.
in either family, friend, um both. There's going to be kids that suffered uh financial instabilities, and here we are expecting them to come back as if nothing happened.
Hmm.
That's not realistic.
Yeah, that's a big kind of theme that I wanted to present through like the work that we did at the Visa Boosters, right? The big gala dinner we had this past Saturday was that I think the initial idea that I pitched is that I think we're expecting these students to feel like, oh, we're going to school and nothing happened.
Yeah.
But the inspiration came when, I've read that the 1919 pandemic, there's no memorial, there's no kind of like park or statue or like a meditation on
Mm.
what this event had done to a community, right? Will COVID have that same effect, right? Well, like, will there be a shared remembrance? Will there be some kind of I wouldn't say reckoning, because I feel reckoning might be like a negative connotation, but just kind of like an understanding that we need a heal in this time. And so that's why I kind of leaned on to the Dia de los Muertos thing, because it's like it is in death that we find life, and it's within that kind of celebration of those two things is that we understand not only just our mortality, but our willingness to kind of live and thrive and overcome.
Mm.
And so that's what I kind of latched on to. And I know this is coming from an Asian person, probably not the best
Hey man,
person to
that's
speak
all
through this.
right.
Yeah,
I don't get too hung up on pedigree when it comes
yeah.
to trying to spread some goodness in the world. If you
And I
want to
think, yeah.
take point in a Dia de los Muertos themed gala for our kids, you're not going to get any pushback from me. Actually, Javier Gutierrez, the organizer, the man behind the event,
Hmm.
he sent me this picture that he took, and it was, and his text message was, uh, so the picture was me. I was playing, um, the band's in the background, and these two kids that I invited to play some percussive instruments were right next to me. If I remember correctly, Tom and Rhea,
Hmm.
and they're both wearing their club sweatshirts. And Rhea's playing the shaker, Tom's playing the guido, like,
Hmm.
you're making a little, and it's just a really cool picture. And he says, "Punk rock, Dia los Muertos, Chinese immigrants. This is America." Like, it's such a great little comment, right? And it's my favorite, one of my favorite photos from that night.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't get too caught up on that kind of thing.
Yeah. And also it's like bridging those two communities that may not share, like, I think these festivals or day of remembrances may not have those same traditions, but if you boil it down to its kind of like base level, they do, we
Mm,
as East Asians and Southeast Asians, we do have holidays that honor our ancestors, and
mm,
same for pre Columbian or colonized Latin American cultures, like there's always this like reverence for the ancestors. So I
Mhm.
think that's why I wanted to point to and connect with like that idea is like we all connect through our ancestors, and we may have different traditions to do so, but it's like it is that kind of like practice of that can bridge those kind of community divides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your original question, I hope that this shared pain and trauma brings about um, some kind of effort for unity in this very polarized, angry world that we live in right
Yeah.
now. And in a lot of ways, like what you're talking about, played into some of the tunes we wanted to play. Like, um, we had our Union Fight song, but we also did a couple tunes that are kind of written about loss of a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and then just did a few of our punk rock version of some old Mexican ranchera tunes.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, like, what I was worried, like, are people gonna take this and get offended by the fact that we're punk rockifying some of these tunes, or are people just gonna appreciate the fresh take on it and just have fun?
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly the second one. I didn't get any negative
Everybody was
commentary
having
from
fun. A
everyone.
lot of the students were dancing. I think some of the students were like trying to get in on it, and get other guests to go dance
Yeah,
into
I saw
into
that. I saw that.
and it was just really fun all around. I think
That
yeah.
it's my first live music since the shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool. Like, I was actually performing in it, so it was kind of like double special.
In a
Um,
crowd, in a
in a
community.
crowd,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a great night, and like good timing. I needed it because like you said earlier, some of that burnout, it's been settling in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
on a normal school year, around this time is when sometimes we say the honeymoon's over. Like, the kids start to kind of get a little antsy, and like
Mm-hmm.
behavioral issues start to pop up. This is around the time I start doing one-on-one meetings to check in on grades. Usually a seating chart adjustment or two have happened around this time. And
I think yeah, I think for me it's like usually around this time a lot of students would be like, Mr. Kim, can you look at my PIQs or
mhm.
personal information? I forgot what the I stood for, but personal
Personal
statements.
inquiry
Inquiry
question,
question.
personal
There
inquiry
you go.
question. Yeah,
For colleges, right? The back in the day was just called personal statements.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but personal inquiry question is now the new term.
I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, that for colleges like for us Californians it's like UCLA, USC, and I
yeah.
think a lot of students
Cal
have
State's do Cal
cal
State's do PIQs?
I think they do their own version, but I think it's through EOP that you have to do
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And I think this year I had a lot of students talk to me about going out of state, and that's a big jump. I think a lot more than previous years, and I thought that
Hmm.
was very interesting. I was just like,
Well,
oh
they've been
damn.
stuck home for a long time.
I think that's
you
probably
know,
it, that they're
want to
probably wanting to venture out somewhere. And I think that was probably one of my biggest regrets going into college, not looking into like study abroad programs and things like that. I think that would have been a very worth it venture to do at the time.
agree.
And I guess it's never too late for me. I always find myself on the philosophy is like you're always a student regardless of being in school or not.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
and I was in a similar. I don't know how much you want to go off on tangents, but
oh, go ahead.
um, like, I couldn't. When I was in college, I was part time for a long time
Hmm.
because I was having to pay for it. My parents, I was still reading their mail to them, so it's like I couldn't in good conscience just leave.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying, like, I wish I could, and like, yeah, me too. That would have been really cool. I did
Hmm.
travel a little bit through my education. Like, I went to Spain, did a trip to DC, but obviously I was back home
Hmm.
within a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think this might lead into another question of or a discussion on like students and families, what have they've gone through, and some of the
Mhm.
biggest challenges that they face, through a housing crisis, on top of a pandemic crisis, on top of a jobs crisis, so for even for some families. But that's a true statement. A lot of When I was graduating San Gabriel High School, there was a lot of students trying to weigh the fact that, if I do go, does this mean I'm leaving my family behind? For for a lot of my friends, they're like first generation immigrant families and households, and a lot of them were translators and helpers in that way for their
Yeah.
families. So I think that there was a lot of guilt associated, and I think some students, I think today, kind of feel that similar guilt too. Am I abandoning my family if I decide to go far and dorm far? And
Hmm.
even in the minds of these students, it's like far is like Irvine, right? That's not
Hmm.
far. Like
Yeah.
I'm thinking like even UNLV or MIT, like that's probably the furthest in my mind. Or
Yeah.
some people folks go to like University of Hawaii, right? So like that's the thing, it's like, given a community that's predominantly immigrant community, I think for a lot of us, we kind of internalize that. Whether or not that's good or bad, I just think that's just the reality. It's like a lot of folks, especially me, I decided to go to Cal State LA because it was just easier, closer to home,
Mhm.
and it was just more economically viable for my situation.
What major were you at Cal State LA?
I initially started with TV and film, but I went through business and general management. Yeah,
Okay.
business and economics and general management. I still like doing media production stuff, but I just thought I like doing the managing, like sets, and managing like business relationships.
Okay.
That was the thing that I always like. I do like to do a lot of production stuff, but generally I was like, I'm a talker.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
talk for a living, so I think if I do a deal or something, like that's my thing.
Cool. Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know what because you also have sort of like a I think a proclivity towards the social sciences or like an understanding. So I was wondering if that was your training, and then if so, did you have some of my old professors? And so,
Oh,
but I was gonna get excited. Shout
uh,
out to Chris Hendy.
oh, no problem. I think one of my biggest subjects back in high school was history. I love
Okay.
history. I love um, learning about you, some of the ancient and more contemporary histories of Asia. Me
Hmm.
being Cambodian American, it's like those things do fascinate me. And yeah, I think of the many paths I had in my brain, I think maybe a history teacher was one of them at the time. And I think watching Indiana Jones, I was like, oh, maybe I could have been an archaeologist.
Yeah.
But that's just pretty much another level of teacher
Yeah.
in my mind.
And it's funny, like I remember at Cal State LA, I took a class called Cultural Imperialism, and we
Mhm.
watched parts of Indiana Jones, and
Oh yeah,
it
definitely.
like I never like I was like probably like 22. I was like, whoa, I never thought of it that way. Like, oh my God, this is a little racist, and like
Yeah, and
like I
same.
still appreciate those films.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna. They're a product of their time,
They're a product of
uh,
the time, and
yeah.
I gotta admit, also a guilty pleasure or
Oh hell yeah.
film, yeah, Temple of Doom. And I know it's the lesser of the three, but I think I just grew up on Temple of Doom, and then I've had a much more like adult respect for the Last Crusade, right? Last Crusade,
Yeah,
yeah. So I
yeah,
guess just given that, and I know you have a shirt on that says "Unafraid Educator,"
yeah,
and I think what I wanted to get at in this current discussion is that, um, in general, what does the need of students are at this point in time? I think in previous years there has been things of students needing more access to find out what supports are at different schools, right? And finding connections, right? Irvine has a dream center. Not UNLV. CSUN has a dream center. Like students can have built-in relationships with that. But what I'm starting to notice through the pandemic and through the issues that we've tried to dealt with within that 8 week, not 8 week, 18-month situation is that there's more of an economic need that a lot of
Mhm.
these students and families need. So what do you think in your mind, in a very general sense, are the needs of students at this moment in time?
Sure. Well, I mean, the economic needs became apparent immediately, and within our union, we helped organize those food drops. I think the first one we did was late May because the lunch programs were going to expire, and and the federal government wasn't at that point continuing them. So we within our union we mobilized, we took donations, we started finding families to adopt, and I mean you were there helping. Um, so I mean Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like first one, food. Like people need food. That's the reality, and that was such an enlightening experience because I was discovering pockets of Alhambra that I didn't know existed. There's parts of the town that are really densely populated, um, and you really get a feel for what some of our neediest students are doing when there's two families in an apartment, uh, or sometimes sometimes worse. And then it was very humbling. Um, it was easier to those times that it was the pandemic started to wear on you personally. It was easier to kind of shift that perspective. Like, you know what, like, um, I kept one of my rallying cries to the teachers when they would, when the pandemic would start to grind on us is like, we're still getting paid. We still have jobs. Let's have a bit of grace to these students because they're really struggling. Some of them are really, really struggling. So that leads us to, like, we adopted that grading policy, or we encouraged the district to adopt a no fail grading policy throughout the pandemic. It wasn't a perfect solution, but what would have been worse is failing a bunch of kids and creating a a generation of high school dropouts. Um, so we're seeing now the effects of that policy with kids that they haven't done homework in a year and a half, and now we're asking them to do these academic tasks, and they're struggling, and sometimes they don't want to do it. Um, I feel that there's a need, um, as you're asking that question, mental health services, and the like one-on-one kind, and we that was always prevalent, but the need for it right now is to an nth degree beyond anything we've ever seen. And um, I hope there helps on the way. I don't know how to answer that beyond that. So on our end, from the teacher perspective, like we got to make sure kids feel like we're on their side, they're supported, even if even if they're not doing their work. And there's quite a few of those, but there's also more things more important than that. Um, so hopefully this is part of the healing, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's
that we
more
were
than
talking about
just
earlier.
yeah, that's the thing for teachers. It's like you're kind of like the front in line
Mhm.
of what these students are going through. And I think like I wouldn't necessarily call myself an educator, but like being tangentially in these spaces is like understanding like you're the first line of defense of these students and like what they're going through. I think a lot of
I'd call you an
time.
educator.
Thank you.
Own it. Yeah.
Thank you. The part of it is that sometimes students may not go up to a parent, like they
Mhm.
probably find more comfort in a teacher, an advisor, a staff member, someone like that for like many different reasons. Like mainly more now it's like mental health, or like, hey, I'm just going through something, can I at least talk to you, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm giving that time for them. I think it's a very valuable tool, I think.
Yeah, and it is. And one of the harsh realities is that some of these kids were locked up with what might have been like toxic parents, unfortunately, right?
Hmm.
Or the pandemic did have a way of bringing out some of the worst nature in some folks, unfortunately. My spiel that I always give to the kids is like, you can approach me and talk to me about stuff, um, but if and I always give them the if I have reason to believe that your health or safety is at risk, then I have to report, because I don't ever want a kid to think, oh, I've betrayed their trust, right?
Right.
Um, so I've always been pretty open to kids talking to me about stuff, but I always give that speech.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, definitely. And I
yeah,
think for our audience, it's like
yeah,
I think as per California, we got to be like
mhm,
mandatory reporters, and
yeah, yeah,
this is a little behind the scenes stuff,
yeah,
but basically, if we hear something, we report it, right?
hmm,
And like, if a student is expressing self harm, that's
hmm,
an issue. If a student has expressed issues in the household that may be abusive, right, or may be perceived as abusive,
hmm,
it's like, please report it, because it
yeah,
can get worse, right? And a lot of the times it's not like one of those things that is like, oh, immediately that child gets pulled out of the family. It's like
no,
there's like there's like
there's a
it's like
process.
yeah, it's like a police
Yeah,
report. It's like there's a process, there's discovery and all of these things. And
hmm,
I think for somebody as an outsider looking in, they might think of it as like, oh no, you're tearing these families. It's like, no, the thing
yeah,
is, it's like there's a feeling of probable cause. The teacher, educator, or staff member feels like there is a degree that of which that we feel like, hey, we need to discuss this, right?
hmm,
And so, yeah. And moving forward, it could be even like an interpersonal thing between two students, right? It could be an issue between two students, and that's probably like the leastest like level, right?
hmm,
It ranges from that to a potential like ideation, right? Like negative
yeah,
ideation. And so, if there's an issue, I think it's healthy to bring it up and then try to find ways to deal with that. Yeah. And I
yeah,
guess a lot of families, and it's a lot of immigrant families that didn't understand that's a resource in of itself.
yeah. And then just if a student for whatever reason feels a connection to you enough to approach you about that, I don't ever want
Hmm.
to say like, I don't I shouldn't hear about that, or it's too like your student, I'm teacher, I'm not gonna cross that line. I don't think it is crossing a line. I think it's part of the work we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And
We in some ways we're all kind of amateur psychs, um, amateur therapists, in addition to just teaching the curriculum.
yeah, exactly. And I can't imagine what a lot of these students have been, going through. I think throughout this pandemic, there's like economic, and like, how am I going to pay rent if I'm going to be laid off for the foreseeable future? And I think a lot of families had that problem, right? How am I gonna feed a family that's not only just my kids, but like, if it's more than likely, if it's a immigrant family, it's a multi-generational household, so it's not
Hmm.
just the kids, it's also the elderly grandparents, right, that needs to be fed. And
Yeah.
so I can imagine there is a lot of students that may be within housing risk, right? Like, we recently had, I think, a college in Long Beach. I think I believe it's the City College in Long Beach, that recently allowed students um, to camp at the parking lots, right? And I remember of an interaction in Cal State LA where I met somebody that was currently facing houselessness, right? Like, was living out of their car,
Hmm.
going to showers and laundry at the school, right? The school was the most primary source of like that, like those necessities, right?
Yeah.
But the student lived in his car for and he graduated and he has a job right now. But I just remembered, like, I can't imagine myself as that student, and
Mhm.
it's hard. And then thinking about that in a high school sense
Mhm.
and feeling that instability. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I've heard it described as I've heard it said, you know, on the one hand, there's people that are concerned with what they've started to call learning loss.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that there's X amount of content, knowledge, and maybe even skills that have not been developed during these 18 months. And then on the other side of that argument, there's the side that um, they have learned other things, types of resiliency
Mm-hmm.
that goes beyond their years. You know what I mean? And I could see both sides of that. Like I think they're especially now coming back into the regular classroom environment. Yeah, there was some learning loss,
Mm-hmm.
but um, yeah, like they've been resilient, um, and it's gonna take time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
But
going to take time for a lot of the students to take that energy to come up to us as folks that are allies to their needs.
yeah,
I think especially like the Dream Center's kind of mission statement is like, providing services to immigrant families and students regardless of status, right? We don't go out there into the community. It says, hey, by the way, we help undocumented people, please come out, please stand up, come up
mhm,
to it. That's not how we do things, right? It's a relationship thing. It's building that rapport between me and that student. And when that does come around, how to tactfully, I want to say deal with it, but like how to be of service to that student, because
mhm,
they might have a lot of questions, right? A lot of the times they wouldn't know until their senior year, right, that immigration is an issue for them.
mhm.
And so, and
I see what you mean.
I think it might take a long time for some students that are maybe they're feeling the issues of houselessness. They're feeling the issues of a situation that's got exacerbated by these 18 months. It's probably going to take a long time for them to knock down those walls and feel comfortable with teachers and
Mhm,
educators. And I think that might be the the undercurrent of like that pent up energy that we're talking about. I think that there is an undercurrent of like, so now I'm in person, who can I talk to? Like
mhm.
that's like below the surface, whereas like, there, that pent up energy below that is, if I need help, who can I go to?
Yeah, and to that end, like I think we have to be almost conspicuously present
Mm-hmm.
as allies because the, there's so many barriers to that they have like internally to just seeking out help. Um, so let's tear down any structural ones
Mm-hmm.
that are there. Um, that's why you know like this shirt was a gift, but I wear it from time to time, and you know in a lot of ways the Dream Center at Alhambra High spurred out of a lot of the anti-immigrant rhetoric around the Trump campaign.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I came into my role at the union and as segment director, and that's how I measure my time. Like that's how I know how long I've been doing it
Right.
because I took this position in September, ready with like all right immediately one of the goals was oh well we need to do our union organizing around this election that's in a few weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was the big loss, and then it was like oh we all those things that he said he was going to do, he's going to start to try to do those things. We need to start to be the shield to the students right now. So a lot of our posters early on, those demonstration, if you remember,
Mm-hmm.
if you were around for our inauguration day demonstration in front of the school, like, you know, there were shields that we actually borrowed from UTLA,
Mm.
our sister union right next door. And because they got, you know, they got a lot of resources. They're a big union. We're small but scrappy.
Yeah, I think I remember those shields and like
Yeah,
the phrases and the beautiful artwork that they made
yeah.
through the that initial like 2016 17 of
So
what
so
happened.
to
Yeah.
see all our efforts culminate in that gala on Saturday was very special,
Hmm.
um, in so many ways. That was such a special night, and yeah.
I was thinking about that because I remember because previously I worked with AAAJ and there was a big hoopla and issue from like there's a memo of what's an what's the other M in the MOU memo of
No
understanding.
understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, memo of understanding. Oh, it was a U. Sorry,
Yeah.
memo of understanding got like put. I guess the most common things like someone neglected to fill out the MOU.
Mm,
Long story short,
yeah.
um,
And I
um,
remember, I remember those days. We had to
yeah,
get you back in. We had to like,
yeah, we were trying
what
to
can
get.
we do to facilitate? Because there's this group and they're helping and they're great, and we would hate for a paperwork snafu uh to derail this.
Yeah, and I
Um,
remember back in the day, I was about to go into San. I was working at San Gabriel at the time. I was about to go to San Gabriel. There, I was stopped at the gate. That the story my colleague had was that he was forcibly removed from Alhambra, and at the time, the club that he was in helping out, right, and a part of like that student network, what the students saw was that Trump got elected, and then they were banging on the door to
mhm,
get my colleague out
mhm.
for a security issue.
Yeah.
That shouldn't have happened. And at the same point, this club was meant to help support immigrant families regardless of status. So
Yeah.
imagine yourself as a student at that moment seeing that. And I imagine that was very traumatic, right?
I only heard about that,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. The specific case. Yeah.
there's definitely a better way to handle
Hmm.
that than pound on the door, and even if it wasn't physically forced, but like I don't know, that 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 from the adult perspective is troubling. From the
Yeah,
kid's perspective, I can only imagine,
yeah,
because
yeah,
there was palpable fear, and there were in the days and months and weeks to follow. Um, there were ICE raids in the community and the surrounding communities. Um, it, those were scary times, and,
yeah.
and we're not out of the woods.
Yeah, no, definitely. When definitely not out of the woods. I just got back from the Cambodian Film Festival that was like about a month ago. But like there we're having discussions about like, this is like even when 9/11 happened, immigration got worse and progressively worse and worse, right? And a lot of Cambodian Americans were forcibly removed from the United States to Cambodia, which a lot of them weren't born in Cambodia, right? They born in a refugee camp in Thailand, right?
Mm,
If anything, their birth certificate says refugee camp in Thailand, right? It's like nebulous citizenship. And
wow.
so that
I
was a
don't I
big
don't know
issue.
much about that. I'd be interested in learning a little bit.
Yeah, that there was a short film. Hopefully I could get them into the Coming Out of the Shadows event in March,
Mm,
um but it was like a big issue within Cambodian circles that
sure.
this has been a law that may have not started with Trump, but Trump has exacerbated,
Hmm.
like made it more easy to be deported under this old law, you know, that regardless of whatever conviction that you had before, you're automatically get the boot
Hmm.
to a country that you don't know of. And I know that's a quick and dirty. I know there's a lot of nuance to the issues that I'm talking about, but that was kind of my like quick and dirty
Sure.
explanation of that. Yeah. Going back to the conversation of unions and like, and I know we might be out of time, so I don't know if I could get to the very last one, but um you being part of the union in ATA, right? We've been having a lot of like different union movements at the moment, given in
Hmm.
time. And this is a little bit outside of the school's range, but do you feel on a historical like basis, right? Knowing the history of like even 1919, do you think this workers' voice and like this movement towards unions is this gonna last? Do you think? And hey, listen, I have a bias. I think I'm more pro union than I'm not pro. than against it, right?
Mhm.
So hopefully workers having more of a voice continues. But in your humble opinion, do you think that this momentum will still keep going, right?
Well, I mean, short answer, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
The reality was pre-pandemic, there were a lot of hard fought teacher union victories nationwide in deep red states,
Mm-hmm.
deep red parts of the United States, I should say. Um, like North Carolina, uh, Arizona, parts of Wisconsin, Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
um, Florida. Hold on, Georgia. Not Florida. Um, so there was this momentum towards protecting collective bargaining, those bread and butter issues, fair pay and benefits, adequate facilities. But there, I think the pandemic put a stall to that,
Mm-hmm.
because now, well, let me roll that back, because the pandemic unfolded in real time. I think early on, teachers were getting a lot of love,
Mm-hmm.
because all of a sudden, kids are home with their folks, and they're getting a better idea of the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
That goes far beyond the delivery of curriculum. I think maybe there's now, and this is partly because I think forces within the media have fostered some animosity towards teachers, and we were painted as lazy, as we don't want to work. But the reality is not that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sure, I think there's always going to be um, some teachers that maybe shouldn't be in the profession, and there are uh, sometimes at unions. I say make that, maybe facilitate that. And I only say that because, and what I mean to say is that that's part of the reason why I'm involved in the union, because I would like to see um, accountability, more accountability for teachers, but also um, sort of like in a bottom up direction too. Like teachers need to give input to our administrators and district officials, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And accountability and transparency, that those are only going to be good things. And I think if the teacher union movement can acknowledge that, like, because there's some goodwill that we need to win, or re-win out in the world, um, we can continue to build on those victories. And maybe, like, we're also seeing this. There's a lot of conflicting analysis when it comes to uh, staff shortages, job shortages, people not returning to work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the realities that I'm trying to get people to understand is we did not fund properly a lot of these positions that have proven vital.
Mm-hmm.
The classroom aid um, does so much, and they get paid a pittance. Let's make that a well-paid position, and we'll get more people in there, because the reality is that we're on close interaction with kids. We're putting ourselves at risk, and you want to put yourself at risk for a minimum wage. And it kind of makes it hard, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To
I was, yeah.
justify.
I was thinking about that because I think you're hitting the nail on the head of like, a lot of childcare places have issues staffing because a lot of folks that used to do those jobs are just leaving,
Hmm.
like it doesn't
So,
pay. Yeah.
and we're in it, so maybe what is the phrase? Can't see the forest for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
But I I hope what we're seeing is this sort of worker renaissance, in which the broader society understands, yeah, the worker, the grocery worker, the instructional aide, the childcare worker, um, these are vital positions, and we have not been paying them
Mm-hmm.
accordingly. And maybe even, if I'm getting even like into a lot more wishful thinking, maybe even a realignment of values, like an anti, or like not anti, but like a less materialism. Like,
Mhm.
at what point are you working just to get a bunch of stuff that you don't need? I
Mm.
say that in my office with some of my toys in the background, but I balance on all things. But it's one of those, like, maybe that's what's happening. Um,
Mhm.
um, and in that case, I think maybe even a revaluation of the family unit, of personal connections, of what's important. You know, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe maybe we'll see.
I
Time will
I
tell.
f- I time will tell, and I would hope to some degree it like what some of those benefits that happen through like a life-changing, global changing pandemic
Hmm.
like that happened back in the day, hopefully happens today, you
Hmm.
know, that um the 5-day work week was born out of the 20s, right?
Hmm.
The getting kids to school, right? It wasn't a privilege, it was a right, like students into public schools. We had child labor up until the 1900s, and that wasn't too far, like the millennium was only 20 years ago.
Yeah.
so so and then more rights towards women, and we've had some issues about that recently. Don't get it wrong, we've been discussing it
Sure.
a lot in my podcast, but the rights of women have been largely felt out of the way, but now I feel hopefully more people are getting to it and understanding what's happening. And I think the last thing that I did want to talk about, I think is, I know Alhambra was in the news
Hmm.
recently about um, vaccine mandates, and
Right.
the issues that um, that had came through that, right? um I think I just wanted to know, I think given in that high school setting, like, have you seen pushback from people that had hesitancy to get a vaccine at the time, or do you want to comment on some of the issues that you've been hearing outside of the classroom about um people having issues with those mandates? Because I think this has been a hot button issue even out of Alhambra, and I'm not I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but the New York City Fire Department has issues, the Chicago Police Department has issues, when it comes to that. So what are some of your thoughts, or maybe like your initial impressions about what had happened to
Yeah, yeah.
at Alhambra? I think I want to say a couple days ago, but like I think over the weekend, I think on Friday.
There was a demonstration, I think Monday morning, in front of the district office.
Oh yeah, it was Monday, sorry.
Friday was the last day, basically, for
Mm,
where people had to show evidence, or go on unpaid leave. Um, I think primarily I look at the misinformation around the vaccine,
mm-hmm,
that people seem to sincerely believe. From, like, there's the absolutely ludicrous, the 5G microchips being injected into you, magnetize, is one I've heard.
mm-hmm,
Um, and then there's the religious objections around, um, the the false information that there's fetal tissue in the vaccine, and that's just inaccurate. And it it's the right thing to do. Um, some people say the vaccine is, ineffective. The vaccines are big pharma overreach, and I think I could talk about, there's connection there. Like, okay, let's talk about big pharma being a little too strong. I'm with you on
definitely,
that one.
yeah.
I think there's common ground there.
Mm-hmm,
Um, but the reality is we're already required to have uh, some vaccinations, and this is just another one, and it's just the smart thing to do. We um, we we want to get back to normal as soon as possible,
mm-hmm,
and the sooner we're all vaccinated, the sooner it's going to happen. Um, and the longer we with delay, the more time we give this virus another chance to mutate.
Right. And become
Um,
something much more stronger. And, I think out of the UK, they're talking about a Delta Plus situation.
mhm.
Right. And I think that was something that I heard like right after right after the gala. I was just like, oh geez, here we go again, Um
Yeah, and like I help take care of an aging father, so he is
sorry.
vaccinated, but let's be real, we can still be asymptomatic carriers. We can still get sick. The vaccinated can, and it's within the realm of possibility of me taking it home to my dad,
Yeah.
to his house, and the days I help take care of him, and uh, that's risky, and it extends even to the mask mandates. There's so much misinformation and anger and vitriol, and um, I struggle to understand it. But maybe if I'm being empathetic, it is that need for community in
Hmm.
these very dark times, and they have found their community that validates them, and so they're sticking to it.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that's the thing. There is that high horse mentality, right? Like,
mhm,
how could you not believe in the science and things like that? But
mhm,
at the same point, I think that there is, going back to my lizard brain, there's this kind of need to find common ground with a
yeah.
community, right? And I
Yeah,
think
and
that,
and don't
mhm,
get me wrong. I didn't want to. Um, I understand that mentality, that high horse mentality, that is also what some people manifest. Doesn't change anybody's mind.
oh yeah, definitely. I don't
So
think,
so I try to push back. Oh, uh, even myself away from
mhm.
thinking like that, because I do catch myself thinking that way sometimes.
Yeah, and when I'm
We're
saying
all
lizard,
flawed.
yeah, and when I'm saying lizard brain, I'm talking about myself in this in the situation. I'm saying for myself, it's like I think that there is a commonality that, like, to a
Mhm,
degree, we want to be in the community, we want to be in the in group, and I think
mhm,
that is one way of seeing that in group. For me, I see it as a way of mutual respect with families. I think for me, the way I understand it and the way that I feel about it is that I've seen the darkest timeline with what these families has gone through, with the hunger, the cold, the heat, right?
mhm,
Us in California, the heat, right? What a pandemic has done to communities of color.
mhm,
In my mind's eye, it's a measure of respect. Like, I'm gonna do my duty, and I know a lot of people don't have that same shared mentality of like social good, right? They may not have those same values or same ideas, right? But that's how I see it. That's how I connect with that. That's how I understand it as a duty for me to make sure that if I respect you as students and family members, right, I'll do my duty to get vaccinated. That's
mhm.
just my that might be a high horse thing for some people, but this is what I believe in my mind.
Well, I mean, duty, responsibility, these are all concepts that anybody can aspire to. So I don't get the vibe you're painting yourself as better than anybody,
Hmm.
by stating that. But I hear you. Like it's such a it's touchy, right?
Yeah.
But there is an element of, hey, you're not going to tell me what to do.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Like, and to be honest, it's kind of childish, um, because we we all have rules, we have obligations, we have responsibilities. Uh, this is this is just an extension of that,
Yeah, right.
right? Um, and there's nothing wrong with that,
Hmm.
with with having that, right? Like,
Hmm.
but unfortunately, it has become a tribal thing.
Hmm.
Um, part of my identity is pushing back against this vaccine, pushing back against the immigrant community. It's like the funny part is, like, it's a package deal,
Right.
um, and it's like if you're anti-vax, then you're probably anti-immigrant, and you're probably a couple of other things that you want to
Couple
line
of
up,
steps down and
and
or
so
up or yeah, anyway, which yeah.
that kind of brings us back to like the importance of pushing critical thinking in education.
Hmm.
One of the things I try to hit home with the kids is like we got to learn how to be wrong. We don't learn how to be wrong in school because being wrong is one of the worst things you could possibly do, because you don't get points, you don't get you don't get the accolades. But I try to create in my classroom. I've heard it called low stakes opportunities to fail,
Hmm.
so that you build that resiliency and you build the capacity to say, you know what, I thought this way about something, and now I've been exposed to some new facts, and now I think this way about something.
Hmm.
Um, and hopefully, kids get that message, and they're the future and all that good stuff. So
Yeah,
like,
that's a big thing. I think if
yeah,
we learned anything in these past year or so is that there are different ways to be resilient, right? There are different ways to learn from this pandemic, and I always told some people like within my friend group, if you coping with the pandemic is doing nothing, that's an absolutely okay thing to do, right?
hmm,
There's a lot of people saying like, oh, this is a great time to learn a new skill, play guitar, or all of these other things. But if your mode or a way to cope with things is just to absolutely veg out and watch the whole series of Squid Game in one day, right? If that's what you want to do, then that's a perfectly fine thing to do. If that's it's a way of coping, right? And I
yeah,
think learning that and understanding that and don't not having guilt where that's a guilt, right? That I think that there's this idea that some people are saying like, oh well, this 18 months, what have you done in those 18 months, right?
yeah.
If those 18 months where you said I'm trying to cope with things, that's a valid statement, and I don't think anybody should be bullied or thought differently of if they were trying to figure out a way to like deal with these.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I I still I think the work we did over the summer, especially over that summer,
Yeah.
but throughout the year with food delivery was also, like I grew up Catholic. Sometimes there's that guilt when my life was relatively okay. I gotta do something. I gotta help out this. Um, it's out of altruism, but also out of some guilt,
Hmm.
for being okay, and that's if you grew up Catholic, you know what I'm
Hmm.
talking about. But like that's interesting. Are we over time? Do you need to stop or?
I don't think we're over time. I was trying to respect your time, so that's why I
Right.
was like,
Well,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, we're a little bit on a roll.
yeah.
I'm cool. I'm cool going a little longer.
Hmm.
Did you want to pick up again tomorrow or?
That would be awesome if we could do a part two.
Okay.
One thing I also did wanted to talk about was CRT, as so a lot of people have put it into shorthand.
Okay. So that's
And
probably good for next time.
that's a good
I
next
think that's a big
time
one. Yeah. Yeah.
discussion. But
Okay.
yeah, going back to
Well,
our discussion about like guilt and
yeah. Yeah.
all of these things. Yeah, it's like
You know what? Also, so that gig on Saturday was my first time ever really being the singer, the lead of a band.
right.
Like
Oh
like
wow.
I'd always been, for a long time I was bassist, rhythm guitar, backup vocals. So my pandemic project in a lot of ways was learning how to play and sing uh, better. I'm not much of a singer,
Mm-hmm.
but um, I think some of those tunes I got a range that I got a vibe that I think I did okay. There was times where it's like, uh my voice sounds horrible. But it's also punk rock, so fine. It's fine.
I definitely
um,
faced that when I was in high school and singing.
yeah. And then, like I said, the cold, like I was feeling it. I was like, oh man, like this is not as
Hmm.
mobile as it usually is, and the nerves, the adrenaline, all that, the sound. Uh, I couldn't hear the other guitar, and the vocals were really loud, and I couldn't hear my guitar as much. Excuse
Hmm.
me, as I wish I could. And but yeah, like I gave myself that pandemic project, and so in a lot of ways, that Saturday, in the layers of how special it was, it's also sort of it was my goal that I had been
Mm-hmm.
working on for throughout the pandemic. Um, so that was cool. Um, Early on, I started to do. I got my really good friend Jose Martinez, who's my co-teacher. Um, he's our drummer. We That summer we had a little jam session in his garage,
Mm-hmm.
and then a couple of buddies at work. We were playing FIFA 2020 on our PlayStations. You know, we did little tournaments, and then we discovered Twitch, and we're like, oh, we could watch the games.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could, we could all watch each other play. And then I kind of, uh, I have a friend who also DJs, and he started doing these little DJ shows. It's like, oh, we could Twitch our little jam sessions in your garage, and so we started doing that a couple of times throughout the pandemic, and then Javier asked us to play. I was like, well, do you know what you're asking us to do? Like, like we're just a
Mm-hmm.
punk band. We're just messing around. Like, we'll do it. Um, but it was also an opportunity. Like, okay, like it's what I said I wanted to work
Mm-hmm.
on. Let's do it.
I've had a similar experience, but it was very much this pot, like literally what we're doing right now. Like,
Mm,
you know, I've had danced around doing podcasts before to varying different degrees, but I think the pandemic had pushed me to like my outlet has always been creative. And if
mm,
I don't do something creative, I feel like I am just kind of like, what am I doing? Right.
mm.
And so
It's
when
great.
when yes, thank you. When push came to shove, I was just like with me and a few close friends. So we were like, you know what? You just got back from the Philippines. How was the Philippines? You know, it's like I've heard you're going through COVID, but on top of that, you just had an eruption. Like, how was that? Was it scary? Was it normal? You being Filipino, that you just felt like, oh, this is just a normal. Don't worry about it. It's just Tuesday.
Mm.
So sort of situation, and you know,
And then your
migrating,
podcast comes about.
yeah, it just kind of came
I don't know.
about. We did
Yeah.
our election podcast, which that was pretty fun.
Okay.
And then we did all of these different like special things, and you know, thought about this in a more creative way, you know, creative space. And
Neat.
yeah, I think that's just how this was born out of that, born out of that being laid off, trying to figure out what is going to happen. I don't know what
Yeah.
other teachers are going through. That initial I don't know if you saw that video, but like the that I made, but it was, the emotion is like, I want to bring folks back to that emotion, that March 13th 14th emotion of like, we're hearing this in the news and we
Was
don't know what's happening. And
You mean the? Oh, sorry to interrupt. You mean the video on Saturday?
on Saturday, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I watched it. It was good.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it was
so
powerful.
we,
It was a little like, oh man, like I remember, like, it's like it brought stuff back.
yeah, live in it for a second. And I just wanted to say, it's like,
Yeah,
this is what happened. This is,
yeah.
we've gone through this together. And you
Well,
know.
it's Sam Weinberg calls it historical thinking,
Hmm.
and one of those little nuanced analysis tools that I try to instill in my students as well. That when we study a historical moment, sometimes it's easy to forget we're looking in hindsight,
Hmm.
and it's like we judge and we're like, why were they dumb, or why they make what these calls, and it's like, but in as it unfolds in the day to day, we hopefully the pandemic was a good example of like, uh, like so many things were evolving, so many things were happening, and the story was different every day, and then there was a lot of misinformation. That's how these historical events that we're studying, that's how they unfolded,
Hmm.
maybe at a different rate, obviously, but or a lot of the details are different, but people are pretty much the same.
Hmm.
And a lot, they're a lot more closer to what they were back then, whether it's 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Um,
Hmm.
so it was a good little reminder of that. Good is probably not the word I'm looking for, but it was a powerful reminder of that. I remember March. the week of the Friday the 13th,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, like my last concert was that Monday,
Mm-hmm.
March 9th. I saw Refused here in LA. My one of my favorite band, and my buddy Jose were in the back. And normally, like Refused, I've traveled to go see them.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, I'm in the pit. I'm just like having a good time, and this time we're both in the back. We're good back here. Right?
Yeah.
That's where it started to, like, things were those days, the way it was accelerating.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was 4 cases in Seattle, and before you know, oh, it's in California now. It's in Oakland. Well, there's this outbreak. I hear there's 2 cases in Pasadena.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of kept getting closer and closer.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that Thursday, um, having that thought, like, what are we doing here? Like, this is a volatile situation. Friday, I remember it was a rainy day. It was. Um, I remember we're at the time talking about Great Depression, so I was like, we're just gonna chill and watch a movie. I put on Cinderella Man. I got a little
Right. Right.
handout. We check out the imagery, but I even, like, I have tables and chairs, so I spread out the chairs theater style and just
Mm-hmm.
put all the tables to the side, just to create some space. Because I wanted to, you started. This is the first time you start hearing about social distancing, and you there were no masks to be purchased at all in
Right.
those days, right? And
And it was
it
also
was
the recommendation too. That right, like at the time was like mask, maybe, maybe not. Yeah.
yeah, there were unknowns, and my read was always like, well, people are keeping them and stockpiling, and our first responders are not getting them. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the reason why that messaging was out there. Like,
Yeah.
especially if you're on lockdown, you don't need masks. But now they're so commonplace that it's like,
I know, definitely.
right? Here's this interesting little phenomenon, little tangent
Mm-hmm.
that has blown my mind when it comes to teaching. So a lot of kids, I haven't really seen their faces very much,
Mm-hmm.
and from here up, I have a lot of kids that look like a kid I've had in the past. Just like a similar kind of passing resemblance from
Yes.
here up.
Yes.
So, but not from here down. So, like, there's this weird, and we're going to be studying this pandemic for a generation. So I'm wondering, like, there's this weird kind of recognition of, I'm expecting little Bryan to look a certain way when we're outside and he's taking a sip of water, and he looks totally different, and it's just like, there, especially those first few weeks, it's like, oh, that doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And that's just a weird thing to think about a kid's face. It's like, it, and I'm sure that there was times where kids are like, "Whoa, I haven't seen your face," and, "Oh, you got a beard," and, like, "Oh, this," like, like, this is me. And it's just a strange little aspect of our work that I still, to this day, kind of like find myself just
Yeah, that's
jumping.
the thing. That's the thing about that, like that whole mask thing. I have a sense memory of how students look like on the screen,
Mhm.
but on the screen is quite different
It's
from
different.
in 3D, four
Hmm.
dimensions. It's like it's completely different. And so when I
Yeah.
saw a student without the mask, I was like, oh, that's you. And I was like, it was like no disrespect. It's like I'd never seen you without a mask on,
Yeah.
like without the mask on. Yeah. So I was just like, yeah. And
Or a super funny one is when, "Hey, I was in your class. Oh, were you that black screen with your name on it in the bottom corner?" Like,
oh yeah,
I don't, I do not know you. I'm sorry.
that was my summer
Uh,
program. That was my
oh boy.
summer podcasting program, and nobody wanted to
Yeah.
put their video cameras on. To
Hmm.
be fair, I do understand a lot of the students may not have the best home situations. So it's
100%
like I
agree.
100% agree, and 100% is very empathic behind that.
Yeah.
But it was just very awkward when I was just like, I met them in person, and they are now an intern in the company I work with, and I'm just like, Oh, you were also in my summer program. I did not realize. I couldn't put two and two together.
That's funny. No, I get it. No, and I'm with you on that one. I my bedroom up until sophomore year was the living room. My
Mhm,
bed was the sofa bed that I would pull out every night. So if I was gonna Zoom, I'd be in my living room, in my
mhm.
slash bedroom slash, you know, like so I get it. I get it. Especially like at that age, the egos when it comes to some of those things are very fragile or
Mhm.
can be, and excuse me. So, but I also truly, it did make it harder to teach in that environment, to connect, to gauge engagement. Um, and to that point, like the phone thing is so much worse this year. Like the a young person's proclivity to mid conversation kind of do one of these things, and
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
know what I mean. It's just like okay, um, maybe that's a generational thing, and I'm an old man and revealing myself for it. But and I do too. But it balance in all things, and I think kids need to relearn some of those soft skills of communication.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I've have since had a few conversations where I'm sitting down at the Dream Center at like an after school session, and I see a student go look at the phone, and I'm like, I know that that's the communication style that you have. I also feel like it's different for me, and I'm still trying to adjust with it. I was also, yeah, like you said, I'm also guilty of it too.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong, students that may be hearing this
Yeah.
a little bit after the
Yeah,
fact.
so I approach
Yeah,
it from a very empathetic place,
yeah,
but it also, we got to acknowledge that it's not the healthiest thing to do
yeah.
all the time. You know?
So definitely it is about an hour and a half into
Yeah.
our podcast, but I do want to ask one last thing just to kind of cap it off, because we've been talking about the pandemic, we've been talking
Mhm.
about vaccine hesitancy, some of the issues in staffing, and all of these things. I do want to end on a very lighter note of what are just some examples that 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 you have as as an educator to say like this is worth it. Yes, this is why I chose this path, right? You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Uh,
illuminate. Go.
sure. You know what? It might sound cheesy, but I've had this phenomenon happen to me throughout my career, and I've been teaching. This is my 18th year,
Mhm.
and any teacher will tell you that there have been times where you want to quit. And without fail, I'm not making this up. Without fail, something comes around that kind of validates the work that you do. And a lot of times it's hearing from like a student from the past, um, or like alumni reconnection, um, and there's been those moments this year. You know what I mean? Like there's been like in those days that followed. Um, you know, it was a Tuesday that our bathrooms were destroyed. There was two big fights. Fire alarms were being pulled. There was this one Tuesday where it just seemed like
I remember that day.
it was anarchy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It felt like the culture of positivity that we've worked for over a decade to build out Alhambra High was falling apart and in a week. And when the teachers responded the next day, showing up at lunch, walking the school during their conference period, teachers and counselors, educators. Um, it was very moving, and one of the things that came about after that was kids had been bugging me to start this guitar club that I was doing last semester of distance learning. We did like a hybrid in-person learning thing,
Hmm.
but it was non-academic. And I'm not sure if you were around in those days, but I did two things. I did I call it Guitar Geeks.
Hmm.
So basically, beginner to advanced, you want to come in, bring your guitars. We're going to do some stuff. And second one I did is for kids that were struggling in my class, but they wanted to do alternative art projects that go with the curriculum. I gave them that option. So there was kids that were not doing much, but came in to do little historically based art projects, and we had a Socratic seminar, and it was just like 8 of us, and little things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Long, long story, long way of saying that in the days that followed um, that Tuesday, I was like, you know what, let's do guitar club, and let's do it on Third Street. And this idea of like reclaiming Third Street, of occupying that space, because that's where the fights were happening. That's where like I think a lot of the native behaviors kind of flow through. Even back, well, you went to SG, but um, in my early days, we had a little bungalow village right there off of Third Street. If you ever
Mm-hmm.
remember, if you've been on the campus back in those days, there's all these bungalows, um, and that's where the fights would happen, on Third Street or behind the bungalows, and then we didn't have fights for years, and so then all of a sudden, like, we're back from the pandemic, and there's fights happening. There's bathrooms being destroyed. So that we had such an immediate turnout for guitar geeks, kids excited, random kids walking up. Hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're just hanging out playing guitar. You want to join us? I don't know how to play. Even better. Like, are you
Mm-hmm.
interested? Like, let's try to get you a loaner. Let's see what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So on that sense, that was a big part of it. Um, the positivity is there, right? And it's like anything. We're like you mentioned lizard brain earlier. We're wired to fixate on the negative. It might be a strong word, but definitely highlight the negative. So we have to push back, and um, I've heard it said. There's this great documentary called Music of Strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard it? Have you ever seen it?
No, this is the first time
It's
I'm hearing. Yeah.
it's Yo-Yo Ma and the Silk Road Orchestra, and sort of like
Oh,
their
oh
story.
yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
great. It's on HBO. If you no plug. I'm not getting paid,
Definitely gonna go
but
check that out. Yeah.
I highly recommend it. As a musician yourself, you're gonna love it. I feel all kinds of feelings when I watch it. So and it's going through the stories, and one of the artists that's part of the orchestra. Um, if I remember correctly, he's from Lebanon, and he's seen some shit in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about the artist sees that and wants to revenge with beauty. And that was one of the things that was kind of resonating in my head, like revenge with beauty, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and how to manifest that. And look at our group; it's diverse, it's positive. We haven't necessarily even had much of a program. Like, so far we've just been hanging out
Right.
and talking about guitar, and that's it. And props to Brian Venti, who's been a big part of one of the teachers at our school, and a good friend of mine who's been a big part of supporting that club. Jose Martinez, the drummer guy, and my co-teacher, brother from another mother, also been a big part of supporting that. Mark Trolson, our band director, he's working on getting us some loaner guitars for the kids that don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's coming together, and it's great.
That's that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've you know what? I gotta get back on my guitar. I gotta be
Yes, you
honest.
do. You
Yeah, I
do.
need to get back on my guitar. If I'm gonna be on campus more often, I'm definitely gonna bring my Telecaster. Definitely my Telecaster into the building.
And like one thing that I feel better about doing it now is if you ever want to jam out in a rehearsal space,
Mm-hmm.
there's a new one nearby in Boyle Heights that opened fairly recently, and I'm liking it. It's like it's fun to turn up loud, right? And
Oh
sometimes
wow.
you can't do that at home. So if you ever want to do it, let's talk.
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
awesome. Maybe
yeah.
we could get like a Dream Allies network thing going. Yeah, Kevin Silva would definitely love that too.
Who's Kevin?
Kevin helps run the Dream Center out in MCLC. He also runs a guitar club out there.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
And
he's my
so
competition.
yeah. But
Okay.
we'll do a battle of the bands that coming out of the
Yeah.
shadows. Anyways, I
That's
want,
funny.
this conversation begs a second part. And I think that's awesome of you to maybe hopefully we could do a back-to-back podcast. And I think tomorrow would be awesome because I do want to pick your brains as a history teacher
Yeah.
on CRT and things like that. And even talk more about your experience in education, because it's like I think a lot of people they have a sense idea of what a teacher does,
Uh,
but I think it's in these spaces where we can have like long form conversations to actually like really unpack like what a teacher does
yeah.
inside and out.
I can do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Pretty much same time.
All right, awesome. So anyways, thank you audience for sitting on a long one, but I think this one's is a really good long one. So please
Phrasing,
like,
Bryan.
thank you. Dude, I love these conversations. Honestly, if it
Yeah, me
honest
too.
if I wasn't working on a podcast, I would still love doing this. Yeah.
Mm.
Anyways, so thank you for enjoying this podcast. Hopefully more to come. I know it's November, December is coming through, and what's that one artist? All I Want for Christmas is just blasting away right now. Mariah Carey. So thank you, and we'll see you again on another podcast. All
Good
right,
night.
bye.